The smiling owl. With a terrible taste in my mouth, I awoke from a slumber that seemed so deep I would never emerge. I have gone to bed at 1:17 a.m. It was now only 2:47 a.m. My hour and a half of sleep had seemed infinite longer than that, filled with twists and turns of the subconscious dream state. But now, reality was all too real. When I say this taste in my mouth was terrible, I don't mean that standard gopher shit breath every middle-aged man has when he wakes up. This taste was very abrasive and unusual. Not bitter, but sickly sweet, making me want to vomit. The closest thing I could compare it to would be the aftertaste of cheap rum mixed with some form of liquefied candy corn. My bare feet touched the cold, hard ground of my new studio apartment, and I walked past my bedroom window and into the bathroom. Looking into the mirror, I opened my mouth in the hopes of identifying the source of my taste, only to find that my tongue was covered in white gunk, almost like plaque. Confused, I then brushed my tongue and teeth to eliminate the taste, to no avail. Beginning to become restless, and then I went into the kitchen, opening the cabinets one by one. I had my mind set on finding something to cut through this terrible flavor. The best option I would find was lemon juice, and began downing it like water. Frustratingly enough, the liquid glided over the plaque on my tongue like a protective film, never even touching my taste buds. Throwing the lemon juice to the ground, I went back to my bedroom. Suddenly, and all at once, I was aware of my presence. A warm, throbbing, almost painful sensation came over me, almost like an external source of nerve stimuli, boldly yet calmingly letting me know that I wasn't alone. It was the kind of inherent awareness one would experience in a dream. Only this wasn't a dream. My instincts directed my attention to my bedroom window, to which, almost in a trance, I then walked to and peered out of what I saw was the visage of an owl sitting on the tree branch. Not a screech owl or a spotted owl, but more of a barn owl, if I had to guess. It was very large and almost immaculately white. For the longest time, I was paralyzed, staring into this crimson, saucer-like eyes. I don't know if I was frightened or intrigued, because this animal wasn't just staring at me. It seemed to be staring relentless into me. After at least 4 or 5 minutes of this, the owl then, with an air of utter calm, smiled at me. Looking into its eyes, I felt strangely comforted. The very moment I broke its gaze, however, everything changed. My tongue began throbbing with white, withering pain I can't even describe, almost like every individual muscles inside of it was tearing itself apart. I ran into the kitchen to put water on it, but it dried like acid as soon as it touched. Panicking now, I put everything I could think of on my tongue to help elevate the pain. Nothing seemed to be helping, but I was determined not to give up until the pain abated. It was 10 minutes later when the swelling began. In addition to the withering pain that had not let up one iota, now my tongue felt like it was being inflated with an air from the inside, barely able to close my mouth. I ran past my window again towards my bedside. The owl was still there, with a smile as big as ever. Reaching for a bottle of ibuprofen, I tried to down a handful at once, hoping it will help the swelling. I was unable to swallow through, and the pills fell abruptly out of my mouth. Nothing seemed to be helping, and in a complete act of desperation, I ran back to the kitchen, past the smiling owl, and to the silverware drawer. Opening it, I reluctantly pulled out my sharpest serrated steak knife. Holding my breath, I punctured my tongue with the knife, hoping the wound would release some of the pressure. Instead of all of my muscles tightened around the knife hole, making my tongue's pain increase double-fold. Reduced to flailing on the floor, I did the only thing left that a rational human being would do. I put the knife in my mouth and began sawing at my tongue. The pain of the blade was nothing compared to what I had been experiencing. Once my tongue was halfway severed, I paused for a second so as not to choke on my own blood, which was now pooling quite dramatically on the floor around me. Gagging on the knife blade, I finished the job ripping the remaining tendrils in half as I yanked the wretched thing out. Showering the floor with my blood, my severed tongue landed in front of me, squirming and flapping like a fish of water. Disgusted and mortified, I kicked it across the floor in the bedroom and closed the kitchen door so as not to see it, and even worse, not to hear it, flapping around. Plugging my mouth with paper towels, trying desperately to maintain the bleeding, I sat crouched in this corner, suspended my shock and disbelief. As my heart rate finally slowed, I was still frozen in fear. So many thoughts were rushing through my mind. They were almost indecipherable. What the hell just happened? Is that a medical condition? Am I dreaming? What was that? The owl? Was that an owl? Then, all too suddenly, the most horrifying revelation came over me like a dark cloud. That owl had smiled at me through the window. It is anatomically impossible for an owl to smile. Overcome with the raw sense of primordial dread, I realized the truth. That's not an owl. There's no owl. That's not an owl. I screamed to myself. The glowing question now remained. If it wasn't an owl, what was it? I was beyond caring. I didn't know what I didn't want to know the truth. I didn't want my tongue back in that moment. All I wanted was to get away from the owl and back to the placid safety. That is when a swooping noise broke into my train of thought. Quickly, I fell silent. Almost as if things were normal again. After waiting, I slowly opened the kitchen door to find the severed tongue was gone. Approaching the bloody pool on the ground, I looked at the window once more, which was now strangely open. Staring back at me with the crimson eyes, the owl was still perched on its branch. However, now, it was posed to open its mouth. What happened next is beyond my realm of understanding. I knew it was impossible, yet happened anyway. The owl opened its mouth with a brand new tongue, spoke to me with an unholy voice. "I will survive," it said. Its smile then spread wider than it had before, revealing a pearly white set of teeth. It was at this point that I blacked out from fear. Once I awoke, the owl was nowhere to be found. The bleeding in my mouth had clotted, and immediately got my things together and headed to the hospital. Once I was in the emergency room, having to communicate with a pad and pencil, I informed the chief surgeon where I came from. A look of genuine unease came over his face as he reluctantly told me that the previous tenant of my apartment came in exactly 1 month prior, mysteriously missing all of her teeth. The end.